My boss said I was easily replaceable in a meeting to a client about why my raise request was denied. The client replaced my boss with me. So this happened about 6 months ago, and I'm still trying to process how spectacularly my old boss destroyed his own career. I work in specialty chemical manufacturing, specifically industrial coatings and adhesives for aerospace and medical device companies. It's a small industry where everybody knows everybody, and reputation is literally everything. Keep that in mind because it becomes important later. I'm 28, been working at this mid-sized company for almost 5 years. Started right out of college as a junior formulation chemist and worked my way up to senior technical specialist. My job is basically being the bridge between our lab and our clients. I develop custom formulations, troubleshoot manufacturing issues, and handle technical support when clients have problems with our products. It's specialized work that requires both chemistry knowledge and serious people skills, because you're essentially translating between scientists who speak in molecular structures and plant managers who just want their production line to run smoothly. Let me give you some context about this industry because it matters. The adhesives and coatings I work on have to perform in extreme conditions. Temperature swings from -60 to +400 degrees, exposure to jet fuel and hydraulic fluids, vibration loads that would shake apart most materials. When an airline puts together an aircraft interior and our adhesive fails, people die. When a medical device manufacturer uses our coating and it degrades, someone's implant could fail. The stakes are genuinely life or death, which means every client has unique materials, processes, environmental conditions, and regulatory requirements. Most people in this industry fall into two categories. You've got hardcore lab scientists who are brilliant at chemistry but terrible with people. Then you've got sales folks who are great at relationships but couldn't explain the difference between an epoxy and a urethane to save their lives. I'm one of maybe a dozen people in the entire industry who can do both sides competently, and one of probably 3 people who can do both really well. That's not me being arrogant. That's just reality. Here's the thing about my industry. There aren't many people who can do what I do. Most chemists don't want to deal with the client-facing side, and most salespeople don't have the technical background to actually solve problems. I'm one of maybe 3 people in the company who can do both, and the only one who's been handling our top-tier aerospace clients. That detail is going to be absolutely crucial to this story. My boss, let's call him Greg, was the VP of Technical Services. He'd been with the company for 12 years, came up through the sales side, and had exactly zero chemistry background. None. This dude couldn't tell you the difference between a polymer and a polyester if his life depended on it. But he was great at taking credit for other people's work and playing corporate politics, so naturally, he was management material. For the first 3 years working under Greg, things were fine. He left me alone to do my job, showed up to client meetings to shake hands and look important, then disappeared back to his office to do whatever it is that managers do when they're not managing. I didn't care that he took credit for my solutions at quarterly reviews, because I was young and just happy to be learning the industry. But over the past year and a half, something shifted. Greg started micromanaging everything I did. Every email to clients had to be approved by him first. Every technical solution had to go through 3 layers of review before I could present it. Client meetings that used to take an hour now took 3 hours because Greg insisted on being in every single one, where he'd spend most of the time talking about company values and strategic partnerships, while the client just wanted to know why their coating wasn't curing properly. The worst part? He started taking credit for my work in increasingly obvious ways. I'd spend 2 weeks developing a custom formulation to solve a client's contamination issue, document everything, send Greg my report, and then watch him present it to the client as if he'd figured it out himself. He'd use phrases like, "after analyzing the problem," and "my solution involves," while I sat there like a potted plant. Clients would thank him, he'd accept the praise, and I'd go back to my lab feeling like I'd just been robbed. One of our biggest clients was a company called Apex Aerospace. They manufactured components for commercial aircraft and had insanely strict quality requirements. We're talking NASA-level documentation for every batch of adhesive we sold them. They'd been working with our company for 8 years, but I'd been their main technical contact for the past 3 years. Building that relationship hadn't been easy or quick. When I first took over their account at 25, they were skeptical some kid fresh out of grad school could handle their complex requirements. So I made it my mission to become indispensable. I visited their facility monthly for the first year, walking their production floor, learning their equipment, understanding which systems had issues. I built spreadsheets tracking every batch we'd supplied, cross-referenced with their production data to identify patterns they hadn't noticed. When their engineers called with questions, I answered within an hour. When they had production issues, I got on a plane and showed up on their floor to troubleshoot in person. When they needed material recommendations for new products, I ran preliminary tests in our lab before they officially requested them. After about 18 months, something shifted. The skeptical engineers started asking for me specifically. Their VP of Operations, Jennifer, started including me in their internal strategic planning meetings. I wasn't just a vendor anymore. I was part of their extended technical team. Last year, Apex had a major production crisis. They were launching a new aircraft interior product line, and our standard adhesive wasn't working with their new composite materials. They were losing thousands of dollars per day in downtime, and were about to switch to a competitor if we couldn't solve it fast. This was a $2 million annual account, and losing it would have been catastrophic for our company. The problem was incredibly complex. Apex had switched to a new carbon fiber composite that was lighter and stronger, but it had completely different surface chemistry. Our standard epoxy adhesive was showing adhesion failures during peel strength tests. Parts were literally falling apart during quality testing. They'd already delayed their product launch twice. I basically lived in the lab for 3 weeks straight. 16-hour days, 7 days a week. I'd run bond strength tests, analyze failure modes, adjust the formulation, run another batch, let it cure overnight, test again. Each iteration took minimum 24 hours because you can't rush aerospace-grade curing times. I was getting maybe 4 hours of sleep a night and living on terrible coffee. The tricky part was that I couldn't just make the adhesive stronger, it had to maintain all its other properties. Same cure temperature, same pot life, same chemical resistance, same flammability rating. I was solving a puzzle where changing one piece affected 6 others, and every piece had to be exactly right. I consulted with Apex's materials engineers constantly, having video calls at midnight because of time zones. We'd review failure analysis together, debate approaches, argue about whether to modify their surface treatment or my chemistry. It was genuinely collaborative problem solving at the highest level. On day 19, I cracked it. Modified epoxy with a different curing agent and a surface active additive that improved wetting. Ran the full test battery, peel strength, lap shear, environmental conditioning, accelerated aging, everything. Every single test came back green. The new formulation was actually 15% stronger than our original and cut their cure time by 10 minutes per part. When I sent Jennifer the test results at 2 a.m., she called within 20 minutes. We spent an hour going through the data. Then she said, "I've worked with a lot of suppliers over 20 years. Most would have given up after a week. You just pulled off something I wasn't sure could be done." The new formulation went into production the next week. Apex's launch happened on schedule. Everything worked perfectly. Greg presented the solution to Apex's executive team like he'd personally invented it. Took full credit in front of their CEO. Got a congratulatory email from our own CEO, praising his innovative problem solving, and even submitted my work for an Industry Innovation Award, under his name, with me listed as technical support. The presentation itself was almost painful to watch. Greg stood there with my PowerPoint slides, my test data, my failure analysis, and explained the solution using terminology he clearly didn't fully understand. At one point, Apex's head of engineering asked him a detailed question about the curing kinetics of the modified formulation, and Greg literally turned to me and said, "Dylan can provide those specifics," before moving on to the next slide. He took credit for the strategy and vision while making it clear that I was just the person who'd executed his brilliant ideas. What made it worse was watching Jennifer and her team's reactions. They'd worked directly with me for 3 weeks. They'd seen me running tests at midnight. They'd reviewed data with me. They'd problem solved with me. They knew exactly who'd done the actual work. But Greg was the VP, and I was just a senior specialist. So they smiled politely and thanked him for the company's efforts while shooting me these knowing looks that said, "We see what's happening here." After the presentation, our CEO sent out a company-wide email celebrating Greg's technical leadership in saving a major account. There was one sentence at the end, thanking the technical team for their support. My 3 weeks of round-the-clock work got lumped in with everyone else who'd done nothing. That stung. Not gonna lie, but I kept my mouth shut because that's what you do when you want to keep your job, right? I figured my work spoke for itself and eventually people would recognize my contributions. Classic naive employee thinking. After the Apex win, I decided it was time to ask for a raise. I'd been at the same salary for 18 months despite taking on significantly more responsibility. I was handling 3 times the client load I had. When I got my last raise, I'd saved the company's biggest account, and I was consistently getting stellar feedback from clients. I had documentation for everything: client testimonials, project success rates, the revenue I directly generated. I went into that meeting with Greg prepared and confident. The meeting lasted about 12 minutes. I presented my case, showed him my documentation, explained how my role had expanded. Greg listened with this blank expression, didn't look at any of my materials, and then said, "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but we need to be realistic about market rates for your position. You're adequately compensated for what you do." Adequately compensated, like I was some interchangeable parts, not the person who'd saved our biggest account 3 months ago. I pushed back, mentioned the Apex situation, my client retention rate, the fact that I was doing work that required both technical expertise and client management. Greg cut me off and said the company couldn't justify a raise right now due to budget constraints and market conditions. Then he added, "Besides, if you're unhappy with your compensation, we can always find someone else to do your job. It's not like your skills are irreplaceable." I just stared at him, actually felt my brain short-circuit for a second, because I couldn't believe what I'd just heard. He kept talking, explaining how the company invested a lot in training and that any qualified chemist could learn my role with proper onboarding, said my expectations were unrealistic, and that I should be grateful for the opportunities I'd been given. The whole speech felt rehearsed, like he'd been preparing to shut me down before I even walked into his office. I left that meeting feeling absolutely gutted, not even angry yet, just this hollow disappointment. I'd given this company 5 years of my life, consistently delivered exceptional results, and been told I was essentially a warm body filling a seat. That night I updated my resume, but I wasn't actively job hunting yet. I was still trying to process everything. 2 weeks later, the meeting happened. The meeting that would change everything. Apex Aerospace was expanding their product line again and wanted to discuss a long-term strategic partnership. This was huge. We're talking a potential 5-year contract worth $15 million. Their VP of Operations, a woman named Jennifer, was flying in specifically for this meeting along with 2 of their senior engineers. This was the kind of meeting where companies usually roll out the red carpet and their absolute A-team. Greg scheduled it for 2 p.m. on a Thursday. He sent me the meeting invite 3 days before with a note that said, "Be prepared to discuss technical capabilities and manufacturing capacity." That was it. No agenda, no strategy session beforehand, no discussion of what Apex might be looking for. Just be prepared. This should have been a red flag, but I'd worked with Greg long enough to know he treated every meeting the same way. Show up, wing it, rely on other people to have the actual answers. I wasn't concerned because I knew Apex's needs better than anyone. I'd been in dozens of meetings with them over the past 3 years, and I knew how they operated. They didn't care about corporate buzzwords or high-level strategy talk. They wanted specific answers to specific questions, and they wanted them fast. I spent those 3 days putting together comprehensive technical documentation, capacity projections, quality metrics, and contingency plans for various scenarios. I knew Apex's needs better than anyone, so I built presentations for every possible direction this conversation could go. Showed up to that meeting with a full binder of materials and a laptop loaded with data. The meeting started normally enough. Jennifer and her team arrived right on time. She's punctual like that. We did the usual pleasantries in the conference room. Our company president had wanted to attend but had a conflict, so it was just Greg representing senior leadership, me for technical, and 2 people from our operations team who honestly had no idea why they were even there. Jennifer had brought her 2 most senior engineers, both guys I'd worked with extensively during the composite crisis. Greg launched into his standard corporate speak about partnership values and mutual growth. Started with this whole presentation about our company's history, our commitment to innovation, our strategic vision for the aerospace sector. Lots of slides with stock photos and generic bullet points about collaborative partnerships and customer-centric solutions. I watched Jennifer's expression getting progressively less interested as Greg rambled on about synergies and leveraging core competencies. She'd flown 6 hours for this meeting and was clearly expecting substance, not buzzwords. Her engineers were both checking their phones within 10 minutes. That's never a good sign in a meeting where you're trying to secure a $15 million contract. After about 15 minutes of Greg's presentation, Jennifer politely interrupted. "Greg, I appreciate the overview, but we're here to discuss specifics. We're looking at doubling our production capacity next year and need to know if you can scale with us. What's your current capacity for the XL7 adhesive line, and what's your timeline for increasing production?" Greg hesitated. The XL7 was the custom formulation I'd developed for them. He didn't know the first thing about its manufacturing process, capacity constraints, or scaling limitations. I watched him flounder for a second before he turned to me and said, "Why don't you handle the technical details?" I started explaining our current production capacity, the bottlenecks we'd need to address for scaling, and the timeline for increasing our output. Jennifer and her engineers asked detailed questions about quality control during scale-up, raw material sourcing, and process validation. I answered everything thoroughly because this was literally my job, and I knew this product inside and out. About 30 minutes into my technical presentation, Jennifer asked about the development timeline for potential new formulations they were considering. Before I could answer, Greg jumped in. "That's actually a good transition point," he said, leaning back in his chair with this condescending smile. "Jennifer, I want to be transparent with you about something. We've been discussing internal resource allocation, and I need you to understand that while we value our partnership with Apex, we're also managing realistic expectations about personnel." I had no idea where he was going with this, but I felt my stomach drop. Jennifer looked confused. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean." Greg glanced at me, then back to Jennifer. "What I mean is that we're committed to supporting Apex, but we also need to be practical about our team structure. Any technical specialist can handle your account with proper training and documentation. We've built robust systems specifically, so we're not dependent on any single person." The room went completely silent. Jennifer's engineers looked at each other. Jennifer's expression shifted from confused to concerned. "I'm sorry," Jennifer said slowly. "Are you saying you're planning to replace your lead technical contact for our account?" "Oh no, nothing like that," Greg said quickly. Then he somehow made it worse. "I'm just saying that if circumstances changed, we have the depth to handle it. In fact, this relates to a recent conversation where someone on my team requested a significant raise, and I had to explain that while we appreciate everyone's contributions, nobody is irreplaceable, especially in technical roles where the work is largely procedural once the initial development is complete." I actually stopped breathing for a second. This absolute moron had just told our biggest client that I'd asked for a raise and been denied, because I was easily replaceable. In front of me. In front of their entire team. During a meeting about a $15 million contract, Jennifer's face went from concern to absolutely stone cold in about half a second. "I see," she said quietly. "And this person who requested a raise, would that be the person who spent 3 weeks solving our contamination crisis last year? The person who developed our custom formulation? The person who's been our primary technical contact for 3 years?" Greg somehow didn't catch the ice in her voice. "Yes, that's correct. Look, I'm not diminishing anyone's contributions, but I need to run a sustainable business. Can't let employees hold the company hostage with unrealistic compensation demands. The work gets done regardless of who's doing it." One of Jennifer's engineers actually whispered, "Holy crap," under his breath. I sat there frozen, my brain trying to process the fact that my boss had just professionally executed me in front of the client, while simultaneously tanking his own credibility. Jennifer looked directly at me for the first time since this disaster started. "I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name at the start of the meeting." "Dylan," I managed to say. My voice sounded weirdly calm, considering I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience. "Dylan," Jennifer repeated. "Dylan, could you send me your direct contact information after this meeting? It seems like we might need to have some separate conversations about the technical aspects of this partnership." Greg's confident smile faltered. "Oh, that's not necessary, Jennifer. All communications should flow through me as VP to maintain consistency and proper oversight. We have protocols for client communication." Jennifer stood up. Just straight up stood up in the middle of the meeting. "I think we're done here for today. Gentlemen, let's pack up." She looked at Greg. "We'll be reassessing our partnership requirements, and we'll be in touch." The entire meeting had lasted maybe an hour, and Greg had somehow managed to insult his senior technical specialist, alienate the company's biggest client, and expose his own incompetence all in one spectacular performance. It was almost impressive in its efficiency. After Apex's team left, Greg looked at me and said, "That could have gone better. You should have prepared me for those technical questions." Then he walked out of the conference room like nothing had happened. I sat there for a solid 5 minutes, just staring at the wall. Part of me wanted to laugh. Part of me wanted to scream. Mostly, I just felt this weird calm certainty that I'd just witnessed someone commit career suicide and take me down as collateral damage. Our operations people who'd been in the meeting looked at me with these expressions of absolute horror. One of them, a woman named Patricia, who'd been with the company for like 20 years, finally said, "Did he really just tell them you asked for a raise and got denied because you're replaceable?" "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, he did. In front of the client." "Yep. The client who flew 6 hours to discuss a $15 million contract. That's the one." Patricia put her head in her hands. "We're so screwed. That account is gone. Jennifer looked ready to murder someone when she walked out of here. She wasn't wrong. I'd worked with Jennifer for 3 years, and I'd never seen her that coldly furious. She was always direct and professional, but that particular brand of quiet anger was something new. The way she'd stood up and just ended the meeting without any of the usual pleasantries. No, we'll be in touch soon, or thank you for your time or anything. Just, we're done here, and walked out. I went back to my office and immediately sent Jennifer my contact information with a professional note, apologizing for the uncomfortable situation and offering to answer any technical questions she might have. I figured my job was probably over anyway at this point, so what did I have to lose? If I was going down, I might as well try to salvage whatever professional relationships I could. She responded in less than an hour. Dylan, thank you for your email. I need to be direct with you. That meeting was one of the most unprofessional displays I've witnessed in 20 years in this industry. We've been working with your company because of you, not because of Greg or your company's robust systems. You solved problems that 2 other suppliers couldn't fix. You understand our processes. You deliver results. I'm going to have some very frank conversations with your CEO about our partnership expectations. In the meantime, would you be available for a call tomorrow morning? I'd like to discuss something. The next morning, I called Jennifer from my car in the company parking lot because I didn't want anyone overhearing this conversation. Dylan, I'm going to be direct, Jennifer said. Your company's executive team clearly doesn't understand your value. We do. I spent yesterday afternoon talking to our CEO and CFO, and we'd like to make you an offer. I wasn't expecting that. An offer? We're opening a new materials engineering division here at Apex. We need someone to lead supplier relationships, manage technical specifications, and oversee quality for all our chemical products. Based on working with you for 3 years, we think you'd be perfect for it. The salary is $145,000 base with performance bonuses that could add another $30,000. Full benefits, relocation assistance if needed, and you'd be managing a team of 4 engineers. I was making $73,000 at my current job. This was literally double my salary plus bonuses. That's an incredible offer, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But what about my non-compete agreement? We've already had our legal team review it. Your agreement restricts you from working for direct competitors in chemical manufacturing. We're not a manufacturer, we're a customer. You'd be on the buying side, not the production side. Plus, your boss explicitly stated in front of witnesses that your work is largely procedural and that you're easily replaceable. That significantly weakens any argument that you possess protected trade secrets. I started laughing. Couldn't help it. Greg's own words had just eliminated the one barrier that might have prevented me from taking this job. I need to think about this, I said, even though I already knew my answer. Take your time, Jennifer said. But I should mention, we're also going to be reviewing our supplier relationships. That $15 million contract we were discussing, we're putting it out for competitive bid. Your current company can participate if they want, but they're going to need to demonstrate technical capabilities without relying on you being there to make it work. The implications hit me immediately. Without me managing Apex's account, our company would struggle to maintain the relationship. We had other chemists, sure, but none of them knew Apex's processes like I did. None of them had spent 3 years building those relationships. Greg had just told Apex that I was easily replaceable, and now they were going to call his bluff. I accepted Jennifer's offer 2 days later. Put in my standard 2-week notice without explaining anything beyond, I've accepted a position at another company. Greg seemed annoyed but not particularly concerned. He probably assumed I was going to a competitor and was already mentally preparing to enforce the non-compete. Those 2 weeks were absolutely surreal. I was still doing my job, still answering client calls, still solving technical problems, but everyone in the office could tell something major had shifted. Word had gotten around about the Apex meeting. In a company of 150 people, gossip travels fast. People kept pulling me aside in the break room or catching me in the parking lot, asking what had really happened. I kept it professional, just said there'd been a difficult meeting with a client, and I decided it was time to move on. But I could see the speculation in people's eyes. They weren't dumb. They'd seen Greg take credit for the Apex crisis solution. They'd probably heard about my raise request being denied. They could connect the dots. Greg avoided me completely for the first week and a half. We'd pass each other in the hallway, and he'd suddenly need to check his phone or duck into a conference room. It was actually kind of pathetic watching this grown man avoid eye contact with someone who worked for him. On day 12 of my notice period, I finally got called into a meeting with him and HR. They wanted to do an exit interview. The HR director, a nice enough woman named Linda, asked me all the standard questions about my experience at the company. What could have been better? Whether there was anything that might have changed my decision to leave. I was honest but diplomatic. Said I'd learned a lot, appreciated the opportunities I'd been given, but felt it was time for a new challenge. When Linda asked if there were any management issues I wanted to discuss, I just said that sometimes priorities didn't align and left it at that. Greg sat through the whole interview looking uncomfortable. When Linda asked if he had any questions for me, he said, "I just want to understand what we could have done differently to retain you." I looked at him for a long moment. Could have said so much. Could have brought up the credit stealing, the micromanaging, the raise denial, the catastrophic client meeting. Instead, I just said, sometimes people outgrow their roles. I think that's what happened here. The ambiguity of whether I meant my role or his role hung in the air. Linda definitely caught it. Greg's expression flickered between confused and irritated. The CEO called me into his office on my third to last day. He looked tired, really tired, like he'd been dealing with a crisis and not sleeping much. "Dylan, I need to know what happened with Apex. They've informed us they're terminating our current contract and putting future business out for competitive bid. Jennifer specifically requested that you not be involved in any transition activities. Do you know why they're pulling their business?" I explained the meeting. Every detail. The CEO's expression went from confused to horrified to absolutely furious as I talked. "He said what?" the CEO interrupted when I got to the easily replaceable part. "In front of the client? About why we denied your raise?" "In front of Jennifer and two of her engineers, yes, sir." The CEO put his head in his hands. "We're going to lose that account. Without you managing it, we don't have anyone who knows their systems well enough to maintain their quality standards. Do you understand what you're telling me? You're saying Greg destroyed a multi-million-dollar relationship to prove a point about not giving you a raise?" "I'm just telling you what happened in that meeting, sir." There was a long silence. Then the CEO asked, "Where are you going?" "I've accepted a position at Apex Aerospace. I'll be managing their supplier relationships and material specifications." He nodded slowly. "So they hired you, and now they're going to use you to find our replacement. That's what this is." "That's not my decision, sir. They made their own choice about the relationship before they offered me the job." The CEO looked at me for a long moment. "Your non-compete doesn't apply. I'm going to the customer side, not a competitor." And Greg stated in front of witnesses that my work is procedural and non-specialized. Your own VP undermined any trade secret argument. I could literally see him calculating the legal costs versus the chances of winning. He sagged back in his chair. "Greg's meeting with HR is scheduled for tomorrow morning. This conversation is confidential, but I wanted to hear your side before making final decisions. Thank you for your honesty." I finished out my 2 weeks. Greg avoided me completely for the last few days, which was fine by me. On my final day, I packed up my office, turned in my badge, and walked out of that building feeling like I'd just been released from prison. My first day at Apex was surreal. I had an actual office with a window, my own team of engineers, a budget for equipment and testing. Jennifer introduced me to the leadership team as their new materials engineering manager, and people actually seemed excited to work with me. The best part? About 3 weeks into my new role, Jennifer called me into her office. "Dylan, we're getting ready to finalize our new supplier contracts for the adhesive products. We've gotten bids from 6 companies, including your old employer. I need you to evaluate them purely on technical merit. Can they meet our specifications? Do they have the capacity? Do they have the quality systems in place? I'm not asking you to tank your old company out of spite, but I need your honest professional assessment." I spent 2 days reviewing all 6 proposals. Looked at technical capabilities, manufacturing capacity, quality certifications, pricing, delivery timelines. Scored everything on objective criteria. My old company's proposal was bad, really bad. They'd clearly had someone who didn't understand Apex's requirements trying to build it from whatever templates they had. The technical specifications were generic. The capacity claims were overstated based on what I knew about their actual capabilities, and the timeline was unrealistic. It wasn't the worst proposal we received, but it wasn't even in the top 3. I wrote up my assessment, highlighting the deficiencies in each proposal and ranking them based on objective criteria. My old company came in 4th out of 6. Jennifer reviewed my analysis and nodded. "This matches what our engineering team found. We're going with supplier number 2. Can you reach out and start the contract negotiations?" That afternoon, I sent an email to my old company's sales team, informing them that they had not been selected for the contract. It was professionally worded, thanked them for their proposal, and included standard language about how the decision was based on multiple factors. I copied Jennifer and our procurement team. About an hour later, my old company's CEO called Jennifer. She put it on speaker so I could hear. Jennifer, I'm calling about the supplier decision. I think there's been a misunderstanding. We've been your supplier for 8 years. Our proposal was extremely competitive. I'm confused about why we're suddenly not meeting your standards. There's no misunderstanding, Jennifer said calmly. We evaluated all proposals on technical merit, manufacturing capability, and cost. Your proposal didn't meet our requirements. This is about Dylan, isn't it? You're punishing us because one of our employees left to work for you. This is about your company's ability to meet our specifications. Dylan evaluated all proposals using the same criteria, and his assessment matched our engineering team's independent review. Your proposal had significant technical deficiencies, and your capacity claims don't align with what we know about your facility capabilities. There was a pause. Let me speak with Dylan directly. No, Jennifer said flatly. Dylan works for me now. If you have questions about your proposal's deficiencies, I can have our procurement team provide specific feedback, but there's nothing to discuss regarding our decision. The contract is being awarded to another supplier. You're making a mistake. Once Dylan's gone, whoever you hired isn't going to understand your systems the way our team does. Jennifer's expression was absolutely ice cold. You're right that institutional knowledge is valuable. That's exactly why we hired the person who had that knowledge. Your former VP explained in front of witnesses that Dylan was easily replaceable and that any qualified chemist could handle our account. We took him at his word. Turns out he was wrong about how replaceable Dylan was, but by the time we figured that out, Dylan was already working for us. Funny how that works. The CEO started to respond, but Jennifer cut him off. We're done here. Your company is welcome to bid on future contracts, but you'll be evaluated on the same criteria as everyone else. Good afternoon. She hung up. Looked at me. Feel good? Honestly? Yeah, it really does. The fallout from Apex pulling their business was apparently catastrophic for my old company. Losing a $2 million annual account was bad enough, but word spread fast in our small industry. Other clients started asking questions about why their longtime supplier relationship with Apex had ended so abruptly. Some of them reached out to me directly to ask what happened. I never badmouthed my old company. Didn't have to. I just explained that I'd moved to the customer side and was happy to help them with their technical needs in my new role. When they asked why Apex had changed suppliers, I said truthfully that it was based on technical capability assessments. That's all it took. Within 3 months of my departure, my old company lost 2 more major clients. They started laying people off. I heard through the industry grapevine that Greg was encouraged to resign about 6 weeks after I left. The official story was that he was pursuing other opportunities, but everyone knew what that meant. I ran into one of my former co-workers at an industry conference about 4 months after I'd left. He pulled me aside and told me the full story. Dude, everything fell apart after you left. Clients started calling with technical problems and nobody could solve them as fast as you did. Greg tried to handle the Apex transition himself and completely botched it. He didn't understand their requirements well enough to even have an intelligent conversation with their engineers. The CEO found out Greg had denied your raise request and then told Apex you were replaceable in front of them. He lost his mind. Greg was gone within a month. What about the rest of the technical team? I asked. 2 of them quit to go to competitors. The company hired 3 new people, but they're all junior and learning on the fly. We're barely keeping up with existing clients, let alone pursuing new business. Honestly, the rumor is the company might get acquired by a bigger player because we can't sustain the revenue loss. I felt a weird mix of satisfaction and guilt. I hadn't set out to destroy my old company. I just wanted fair compensation and basic respect. But Greg's ego and stupidity had created a domino effect that took down the whole operation. Here's where the story gets even better. About 6 months into my role at Apex, Jennifer got promoted to Senior Vice President. She pulled me into her office on a Friday afternoon. Dylan, I need a new VP of Materials and Supply Chain. Someone who understands both the technical side and the relationship management side. Someone who's proven they can build systems and handle complex supplier relationships. You interested? It came with another massive raise, a corner office, and a seat at the executive leadership table. I was 29 years old and running an entire division for a Fortune 500 aerospace company. I accepted. Last month, I ran into Greg at that same industry conference where I'd talked to my former coworker. He looked rough, older, tired. I heard he'd been consulting but wasn't having much success because word had gotten around about what had happened at my old company. He saw me, hesitated, then walked over. Dylan, congratulations on the VP role. I heard about it. Thanks, I said neutrally. There was this awkward silence. Then Greg said, Look, I know things ended badly. I may have mishandled that Apex meeting. If I could do it over... Greg, I interrupted. You told our biggest client that I was easily replaceable because you didn't want to give me a raise. You tanked a multi-million-dollar relationship to protect your ego. And you did it in front of me like I was some disposable asset instead of the person who'd been carrying that account for 3 years? He opened his mouth to respond, but I kept going. The funny thing is, you were half right. I was replaceable. To you and that company. But I wasn't replaceable to Apex. They knew the difference between someone who actually delivers results and someone who just takes credit for them. They chose the person who had the institutional knowledge and technical skills. They chose me. I made a mistake, Greg said quietly. Yeah, you did. But here's the thing. It wasn't just one meeting. It was years of taking credit for other people's work, of managing up instead of supporting your team, of treating talented people like they should be grateful just to have a job. That Apex meeting was just the moment where your entire approach finally caught up with you. I could have been angrier, could have really twisted the knife, but looking at him standing there, I just felt tired. This dude had made his own choices and faced the consequences. Nothing I could say would make that hit harder than it already had. Take care of yourself, Greg, I said, and walked away. That interaction pretty much summed up the whole experience. My old boss thought I was easily replaceable because he'd never bothered to understand what I actually did or what value I brought to the company. He confused having a title with having expertise. He thought he could treat people as interchangeable parts because he'd never built anything himself. He'd just taken credit for what other people built. And when the client he'd been taking for granted finally had enough, they didn't just switch suppliers. They hired the person who actually made the relationship work and gave him the authority to rebuild their entire supply chain. Greg had handed them the blueprint for how to solve their problem. He just never imagined he'd be on the wrong side of it. I'm not going to lie and say I didn't feel vindicated. I absolutely did. But more than that, I felt relieved. Relieved that I'd gotten out of a toxic situation. Relieved that my actual skills and work ethic had been recognized. And relieved that I'd landed somewhere that valued what I brought to the table. The VP role at Apex has been incredible. I've built a team of talented engineers. We've completely restructured our supplier relationships, and we're launching new products that wouldn't have been possible under the old system. Jennifer has been an amazing mentor, and the executive team actually listens when I present technical concerns or strategic recommendations. Last quarter, I gave a presentation to our board of directors about supply chain optimization that saved the company $8 million annually. The CEO personally thanked me afterwards and said I was exactly the kind of technical leadership they needed. That's the difference between Greg's company and Apex. One place treated expertise as disposable. The other place put expertise in charge. As for my old company, they got acquired by a larger chemical manufacturer about 8 months after I left. Most of the original leadership team was replaced. The company still exists, but it's basically just a brand name now with completely different management and systems. I occasionally get messages from former colleagues asking if Apex is hiring. I help when I can, because good technical people deserve to work at places that appreciate them. Several of them have joined my team, and they're thriving in an environment where their contributions are actually recognized. So yeah, my boss called me easily replaceable in front of our biggest client to justify denying me a raise. That client replaced him with me and took their business elsewhere. Small industry, long memories, and consequences for treating people like disposable assets. To anyone reading this who's in a similar situation, getting taken for granted, having your work credited to someone else, being told you should be grateful just to have a job. Document everything. Build relationships with your clients or customers directly. Make yourself genuinely valuable through expertise and results, not just by showing up. And when someone tells you you're easily replaceable, consider that maybe they're the one who's replaceable, and they're just too busy protecting their own position to notice the ground shifting underneath them. I'm not replaceable. Turns out that was Greg's problem, not mine. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.